You don't lack success. You were trained to feel ashamed for not winning a game that never existed. The weight on your shoulders wasn't born from laziness or incompetence. It was engineered like a virus, planted deep inside your chest by a system that feeds on your discomfort. The money you don't have is just a mirror where your self-worth was forced to kneel. Every success story you scroll through is another symbolic needle, stitching the idea that you don't deserve to exist unless you're producing a spectacle. This is for those who cried alone after watching someone make it with less effort. For those who felt like unfinished drafts in a world of polished facades. For those who believed their lack of car, business, or lifestyle meant they were somehow inferior. What you're about to learn is not motivation. It's a silent exorcism of shame you didn't even know you were carrying. Meritocracy is a shadow play. Only a few get the spotlight. And the magical entrepreneurship they sold you is just a new religion, with gurus instead of prophets, spreadsheets instead of miracles. You didn't fail because you weren't good enough. You woke up before your soul was completely devoured. Success today isn't about building anything. It's about appearing victorious long enough to keep others consuming. Your shame is the most valuable fuel in this machine. The ashamed failure is the perfect emotional employee. You pay to hide your void, while the system profits from your performance. You only feel ashamed for not being successful because they convinced you that your existence must be validated by numbers. We are living through an emotional collapse disguised as a financial crisis. Anxiety has become a routine, comparison, an addiction. The search for meaning was replaced by the search for status. Every notification is a microdose of fake significance, while your real value rots beneath the rubble of your self-esteem. The world isn't asking you to win, it's begging you to keep feeling not enough. Because the system doesn't profit from wholeness. It profits from your chronic pain, your endless need to prove yourself, your existential exhaustion. I was once addicted to performance too. I tried proving my worth with degrees, businesses, promises of greatness. And the more I chased it, the more distant I became from myself. Until I realized it was never about arriving there. It was always about escaping here. Escaping this cycle of toxic comparison. Escaping this maze of validation. Escaping the illusion that success equals value. The shame of not winning was never mine. It was implanted, and I return it now, with symbolic interest. If this pain has a name inside you, comment. I exist even without winning. You were trained to seek validation before seeking truth. Since childhood, praise came when you performed, not when you felt. Applause came when you obeyed, not when you questioned. That's how an adult is born who no longer belongs to themselves. Someone who only feels real when reflected in someone else's eyes. In this theater, failure isn't about not achieving. It's about not being seen. You might have peace, love, and clarity. But if there's no trophy to display, no job title, no visible success story to post, the system will silence you with condescending looks and humiliating algorithms. Shame is distributed like a symbolic punishment for daring to exist outside the script. And you've learned to swallow that poison with gratitude, calling it self-awareness. Today, not being successful is social heresy, a sin against the cult of constant progress. Being invisible in the world of spectacle is a symbolic curse. That's why so many would rather drown in debt than admit they feel lost. The pain of not belonging weighs more than any bill. The financial system is not neutral. It's a ritual of exclusion. Applause is reserved for those who play the winner's role perfectly. The rest are pushed into a symbolic waiting room where only those who pay with soul, sweat, and silence are allowed into paradise. And in that silence, you start believing you are the problem, that you didn't work hard enough, that you must keep trying. But here's the brutal truth. The game is rigged to have a few winners and millions of almost there. Because the real profit lies in the chase, not in the outcome. The market doesn't need everyone to succeed. It needs everyone to keep trying. Your guilt, your exhaustion, your emotional debt is the true currency. This is the performance failure loop. Try, fail, blame yourself, buy a course, get motivated, fail again. Repeat. Each cycle tightens the chain. until you start thinking failure is your identity. And that's when the predator feeds, not on your money, but on your desperate need to become someone. The pain of not succeeding isn't yours, it's theirs. A symptom of a system that demands constant victory, but delivers ruin dressed as opportunity. And as long as you keep judging yourself by what you haven't achieved, you'll remain symbolic food for the machine. The system doesn't want you to win. It wants you to keep trying. Share this with someone who still blames themselves for not making it. This war can't be won alone. You don't want success, you want relief, you want silence inside your chest, a moment where breathing doesn't feel like you're falling behind. But the world won't give you that. In the theater of infinite performance, looking functional is more important than being honest. You get out of bed like someone putting on a plastic armor. Forced smiles, daily goals, motivational quotes stolen from influencers who are quietly collapsing themselves. The shame of not winning forces you to pretend you're in control. You post symbolic achievements, invent micro-victories, hide the chaos with emotional filters, just to seem human enough, profitable enough, presentable enough. And each time someone believes the performance, you sink deeper into the quiet terror of not being allowed to fall apart. Failure today isn't a result, it's a social identity. The absence of visible success has become a symbolic disease. If you're not thriving, you must be defective, broken, weak, and worse, contagious. Emotional poverty is the new leprosy. People don't want to hear your truth, they want your comeback story, even if it's a lie. Because truth is exhausting, because admitting the system is broken means destroying their own identity. So instead, they avoid you, silence you, offer you ready-made solutions that don't work. Coaching, branding, mindset books, all packaged in bright mantras like, you just have to want it, or change your mindset. But the truth is, wanting isn't enough. Sometimes surviving is already a victory, but no one wants to hear that, unless they're willing to break the illusion. You feel ashamed of not being successful because society taught you that worth equals result. And result today means exposure. If no one saw it, it didn't happen. If no one clapped, it didn't count. This logic doesn't create humans. It manufactures personal brands. People who live to appear, who consume to belong, who perform a life they don't live. The worst part? The more you pretend, the further you drift from yourself. Shame stacks in layers. Shame of not having, shame of pretending to have, shame of hating yourself for both. A symbolic cycle of self-sabotage, funded by a system that profits from your inner disconnection. No one wants to talk about this, because everyone is faking together. Failure became taboo. Doubt became weakness. Vulnerability became a moral flaw. But while everyone smiles in this corporate theater of mandatory happiness, the real pain is growing in the underground of exhausted souls. You are not broken. The model is. The narrative is. The idea that we must win to be valid is. Constant performance is the new prison. And the key was never in your hands. If you've ever smiled while secretly falling apart, comment, "I'm tired of pretending I'm okay." Failure isn't just an outcome, it's a product, a subscription, an emotional service you unknowingly renew every time you believe you're not enough. There's a whole economy spinning around your unresolved pain, platforms, influencers, leaders, and promises that only work if you keep feeling small. And the more you try to escape it, the deeper you sink. Because everything sold as a solution was designed to reinforce the wound. The personal growth industry doesn't want your healing, it wants your recurrence, your emotional subscription, your endless attendance at events that promise transformation but deliver dependence. And you don't even notice, because you've been taught to call it growth. The logic is brutal. If you feel like a failure, it's your fault. And if it's your fault, you need to buy the fix. A course, a formula, a lifestyle, a mindset. Symbolic failure has been privatized. It's now psychological real estate that only accepts payment in identity. You trade essence for acceptance, doubt for certainties, your personal rhythm for peak performance. and the shame of not winning becomes a silent mantra whispered each morning. I need to improve. But improve for who? For what world? That question never gets answered, because the real question is too dangerous. This industry feeds on comparison, on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. Every rags to riches story that feels organic is often a paid production. Influencers who fake scarcity to sell abundance. Entrepreneurs who fabricate hardship to sell shortcuts. In this system, success is a costume, and you were convinced you had to fit inside it, even if it meant emotionally amputating yourself. No wonder so many successful people collapse in silence. The soul knows. The body remembers. Pretending to be someone costs more than money, and you've been paying with your sanity. The shame of not being successful is the most profitable product of the digital age. It ensures you keep comparing, keep consuming, keep proving, keep feeling guilty when you can't. This isn't chaos, it's design. Psychological engineering at scale. Because the more you blame yourself, the easier you are to control. The mind colonized by failure becomes obedient, quiet, and financially useful. The system doesn't want your awakening. It wants your endless adaptation, even if it costs you everything. Send this to someone still trying to fix themselves without knowing why. Time to break the spell. You were taught to fight yourself as if you were the problem, as if your sadness, your slowness, your confusion were malfunctions. That's how toxic self-help was born. A cycle of emotional demand disguised as empowerment. The message is always the same, whispered by smiling influencers and shiny thumbnails. If you haven't made it, it's because you're not doing it right. That's not guidance. It's a psychological sentence, because it turns your pain into debt, your emptiness into personal failure, your incomplete life into a design flaw. But no one tells you the truth. The game was designed to be unreachable. The further the goal, the more profitable the process. The success industry is a silent religion, and like all religions, it needs sinners. You're taught to see your exhaustion as laziness, your doubt as lack of faith, your rest as weakness. Modern gurus take the altar with promises of purpose and high performance, but behind their smooth words is an algorithm that only thrives if you keep feeling broken. Every technique, every framework, every key to transformation is another locked door. Because the more you try to fix yourself, the more you subconsciously confirm that something is wrong. And so, unknowingly, you become complicit in your own captivity. Shame becomes the lens through which you see the world. You start evaluating everything through performance, relationships, your body, your time, even your spirituality. Everything must produce results. Everything must be optimized. You're never ready, never enough, never clean enough to allow yourself to simply exist. And that's the violence. Living in constant self-correction is living without rest, without roots, without self. You become a symbolic laborer of your own fantasy of greatness. That's the system's ultimate triumph, turning the victim into a self-funded prisoner. Guilt in this machinery is the most efficient leash, because the guilty mind disciplines itself, punishes itself, exploits itself, believing it's evolving. And the more it sabotages itself, the more it believes it's close to breakthrough. The promise of success becomes a mirage that keeps the herd moving, always waiting for the next secret, the next coach, the next webinar that will finally set them free. But it won't, because the cage is internal, and the key was never on the outside. Comment: I return the guilt I was taught to carry, and watch the symbolic weight vanish. It's time to return the shame that never belonged to you. Time to tear up the symbolic contract you signed unknowingly, the one that said your life only mattered if it looked like a highlight reel. Enough. The performance of success is an aesthetic scam designed to keep you busy with your own emotional mutilation. And the shame you carry isn't failure, it's clarity. It's the raw scream of a soul that finally realized it wasn't born to perform, but to exist. And in this world, simply existing is a radical act of rebellion. From now on, the game changes. You won't chase a system that profits from your self-hatred. You'll exit it. This isn't about giving up. It's about surrendering the illusion. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to appear big. You don't need to turn every fall into content, every crisis into a case study, every dark day into growth. That's predator language, symbolic engineering to make you labor for validation. You're allowed to sit in silence and produce nothing. You're allowed to fail honestly. You're allowed to disappear without explanation. And still, you're worthy. Because value doesn't live in performance, it lives in presence. In what remains when all your displays are dismantled. That's where your truth waits. That's where this war ends. This is no longer a war against scarcity. It's a war against the logic that says your worth must be seen to be real. What begins now is a ritual, a symbolic rite of return. Close your eyes. Picture yourself opening your hands. One by one, return the guilt, the inherited shame, the implanted fear, the desperate hunger for approval. Return them and feel the void. Feel the silence. Feel the discomfort. It is real. It is necessary. Because only in silence can a free identity be born. You don't need to win to be worthy. You don't need to perform to be real. You are what remains when all the masks dissolve. And that core, that motionless point inside you, is indestructible. That's where the war ends. That's where real life begins. If this ritual reached you, type, "I reprogram myself now," and pass this on to the next soldier. One by one, we break the illusion.